Hello and welcome back, and that is right, it's time for another software review, and today we are looking at QNAP's QuTS Hero software in version 5.1. This is a bit of software that we have reviewed already in the past when it was QTS 5 and QTS 4 that came before it, and we've even looked at the ext4 version, but today we're going to look at the very latest release in their ZFS file system software known as QuTS Hero, a name I've always kind of difficulty wrapping my head around. Now, I'm only going to appear on camera here and during the outro, quite simply because no matter how big I make this little image of me or wherever I put it in the screen, it's always going to be in the way. And in the course of this review, we're going to sort of merge things we do on the channel with a review of this software and combining it with our usual should you buy. And this is where I give you 5 reasons to go for a QNAP NAS with QuTS, and of course 5 reasons you might want to give it a miss. Another thing I will touch on throughout the course of this video is, although I am utilizing a TVS 872 to get this review and overview done, I will highlight and occasionally dip into another NAS here that's running QTS, the ext4 file system software from QNAP, but it's going to be running all of the same applications, and I'm only doing it so I can run both of these devices concurrently and show different software attributes of the apps you can run. So don't worry about occasionally when I flick between them. You can tell if you look at the bottom, you'll see QTS and you'll see at the bottom QuTS. Don't worry, the app will run the same. And if any instance I'm running something that is very specific to QuTS, I will let you know. But apart from that, let's crack on with the first reason you might want to go for QuTS on your QNAP NAS. Now, when QNAP released QuTS, they weren't exactly reinventing the wheel when it came to the file system, were they? QuTS, the thing that makes it stand out, whether it is you're going for the new version of 5.1 or you're going for, you're sticking with one of the previous versions, the big appeal is that you're running a NAS using the ZFS file system. I know I've said the word file system twice there, the Zettabyte file system. Now, Zettabyte file system is largely associated in most circles with this brand, TrueNAS. TrueNAS Core, originally known as FreeNAS, and ZFS has a bunch of inherent benefits that we'll talk about later on in the video, and they have kind of been the king of this platform. Indeed, we did a full review of TrueNAS Core a little while ago, looking at, I believe, version 13. I'd have to double check that, but when that was out, we went through all of its inherent benefits. But one of the biggest downsides we talked about, and there was a couple of downsides there, one being the complexity and the learning curve. The other one was to do with the software options that were included with it. Because those of you that were moving away from turnkey NAS solutions and, ready to use kind of very easy solutions, where things could be more tailored and chewable and user-friendly, was just something that wasn't available very readily or easily within TrueNAS. And that's why QuTS 5.1 is such a game changer, because you're getting all of the inherent benefits of ZFS, something we'll talk about in part 2 in this video, option 2. You're getting all of the benefits of ZFS and the performance and the redundancy benefits, but at the same time, you're getting all of the apps and benefits and services on your QNAP NAS as you would have come to expect. Now, these can be distributed and optionally accessed in a number of ways. If you head over to the App Center, there are absolutely loads of one-click installer applications. Not only that, but you've also got access to the community via the QNAP Club. And again, we'll have to open it up in a new tab. But in the QNAP Club, you have access to a whole myriad of applications made and kind of kept on top of by the community. Now, the community behind the App Club repo center from qnapclub.eu isn't as thorough, I would say, as that of the community behind TrueNAS, because that is a big community project and this is kind of a sideline. But still, nonetheless, whether it is that you're looking at the applications in their own app center or you're looking at the third-party apps, there are absolutely loads. And standout options I would talk about there, First and foremost, for you multimedia users, if you're looking at media, you have first and foremost the multimedia console to manage all of your applications via a single portal, which allows scheduled indexing, scheduled thumbnail generation, offline transcoding, all to be managed in a single user-friendly portal here via the window of your web browser. But it doesn't stop there. They've got tailored applications for managing video, which again comparable to that of Plex with metadata scraping and all of the multimedia being funneled and distributed and catalogued accordingly. You've got the same for your music collections there, which again you can stream quite remotely from here and manage all of that stuff from this single interface here. On top of that, if you want to go for photography, you can go ahead and use the AI-powered photo recognition tool that will analyze your decades of photos and then use AI recognition to not only allow facial recognition for you to tag for future reference in the past and the present, dare I say, but on top of that, you've also got access to AI-powered subject recognition, which will scan your photos for categories, which can then be broken down, such as this one for food, which we can then break down to different kinds of food, all of which can be broken down. Is it always accurate? Well, you tell me, because what I'm looking at there, yes, sure, that's carrots, but that's a tiny little pint, if you ask me. But still, nonetheless, it is improving all the time with its inbuilt AI engine. And again, that for multimedia, that does extend to a myriad of different mobile applications that can be utilized for multimedia, for file access, for tailored utilization as and when you need it. And of course, different applications to be installed on your desktop, different applications for the NAS, just vast numbers of tools for multimedia. Now, moving beyond multimedia, if you're a business user, you can look at things like multi-stage backups with Hybrid Backup Sync 3, backing up NAS to NAS, either locally or remotely over the internet, or synchronizing with cloud-based access, such as using third-party clouds to synchronize between the NAS and your local system. Talking of synchronization, you can go ahead and use Hybrid Mount that allows you to remotely mount your cloud service. So rather than synchronizing with these, you can have this storage treated as if it is local, bolting on all these different storage areas, as well as bolting on other storage devices locally or via the network, remotely over the internet, all of which can be attached to your NAS, and then utilizing all of those apps we've just gone to make the most of them. Now, the system has quite a robust system monitoring process at all times that you can use to check what the system is doing. On top of that, at any time you can head up here into the GUI to get more information for real-time access data on the NAS. Then, beyond that, you've got the network and virtual switch monitoring tools, all of which are incredibly switchable between the basic options there to keep things chewable and user-friendly, all the way down to the more advanced tabs. Now, this isn't as user-friendly, I would say, as a Synology, but I will say you have a level of control and customization here that is unparalleled in the world of turnkey NAS solutions. Then on top of that, when you're looking at all the detailed applications and services, you can use tools like QSearch and QFiling to intelligently, and with the utilization of AI, search the system in a number of different user-friendly and easy ways to search for different files and processes. So for example, if you want to search for applications, you can use the top bar there, or use QSearch quickly on the fly to find either Word documents, individual images, or use the AI or OCR readers to search through the NAS in a comprehensive yet speedy fashion. Then you have support of the surveillance application with 8 camera licenses that allow you to use QVR Pro to create your very own bespoke NVR. And although I'm not going to go through it in too much detail in this video, I have gone into it in an extensive amount of detail, going over their surveillance products in so much detail with all the camera multi-access utilization, then utilizing a lot of other stuff there with the software review there, going through all the different features and services on the mobile, on the desktop client application. And again, we've got the videos overrunning. Hello, Tom at Lawrence Systems. Hope you enjoy the free plug. We went through the mobile applications for surveillance. All of that is included and running here in between. Then on top of that, we've got the HDMI output application. That's right, if your QNAP NAS has got an HDMI port, you've got this completely parallel interface that allows you to install multiple applications over the HDMI port for enjoying with a remote control, a KVM, or a remote mouse if you choose. Overall, the level of applications and services that are included are just unparalleled in the world of ZFS, and as good as TrueNAS is, and again, if you're looking for robust, incredibly secure and DIY level open source NAS software, you cannot go wrong with TrueNAS, but there's no denying that the feature set that are built into QuTS Hero on their ZFS file system, if you're looking for a softer entry into ZFS and a more hand-holdy approach, you're going to have just an unparalleled level of applications and services here. Even looking at managing your storage, something we'll go into a lot more detail later on. Utilizing their GUI here to access your storage and get an overview that is a lot more understandable is going to be readily accessible here in a way that on TrueNAS you have to kind of dig through the weeds a little bit more. It's a lot more chewable, it's a lot more user-friendly, and it's a lot more understandable here. Yes, it's still techy, as you would expect, because some things just can't be simplified. But overall, the level of apps and services included in ZFS-based QNAP's QuTS here is one of a kind in terms of ZFS file system turnkey NAS systems right now. Next up, if we're going to extol the virtues of ZFS, we really have to talk about how it's been implemented into QTS and ultimately where the benefits lie. Now, if we go into the storage area here, we can see that it is, again, very user-friendly and easy to use. Everything's all laid out for you there. And when we go into the storage and snapshots, not only can you see that it's very easy to enable or disable things like inline compression, which is when data is being compressed as it's being written to the disk, and inline deduplication, where data that is coming from multiple sources that is the same ensures that only one copy is kept, but the legacy of data where it comes from is maintained. These are things that can be turned on very quickly and easily, although you will need at least 16 gig of memory in QuTS to take advantage of deduplication. But if we double click, for example, the multimedia folder here, we can see a little bit more information, notwithstanding that we can also enable other benefits that are included within ZFS here in order to make the most of space and make sure this data can be accessed as efficiently as possible. But on top of that, you can find out real-time information about the space that has been saved by these processes on that particular storage area, giving real-time information about the benefits of where and when to activate these ZFS-based services. It takes a little while for the information to be retrieved, but once you get in, you can find out more information about the savings that have been accrued over time and whether to enable or disable them as well. If you have a look at the individual storage pools from there, there's even more you can do. For example, you can look into expanding the pool. That is right. Now, in QuTS, you can expand your existing storage pool one disk at a time, something that currently in the versions of TrueNAS that are out there, and it is something that's been experimented with but not fully rolled out. You can expand your ZFS RAID pool one drive at a time without having to just add on a cluster of another RAID bolted on. And again, there's loads of other options that can all be inserted there. Another thing that is beneficial in ZFS that has been carried over here is just how fast storage pools take to be built. Unlike traditional ext4 storage, which takes ages, and we're talking hours if not days depending on the storage, ZFS can build these things in minutes. On top of that, you've got the other benefits of ZFS such as RAID resilvering, when drives are reinstalled into the array after accidental removal and not resulting in a whole drive being reformatted. But on top of that, you've got the other benefits such as triple RAID parity and the ability to take advantage of the traditional RAID Z and RAID Z 1 and 2, in this case translated into RAID 5 and RAID 6 labeling within the QNAP. Creating RAID pools, it's super easy. It may not be easy for me to do here given that I've allocated all of the drives, but for example, the list of RAID options is pretty extensive there, and again, all of the benefits you would expect from RAID Z are presented here within the RAID system of the QNAP. And again, you may also have noticed that we can use the M2s, something we'll talk about later on. But when we do create a pool, and if we go for a bog standard RAID 0 on a single drive here, you're able to see that you've got all of the usual options there for over provisioning, alerts and more. And on top of that, it's that quick to create these if we choose. On top of that, if you want to go ahead and take advantage of things like write once, read many, and encryption, well, good news for you. It's that straightforward. Heading back into the File Station application, creating a new shared folder, because remember, thanks to using ZFS, we've removed the volume layer entirely. From here, we can create a nice easy new storage pool. From that we can change our provisioning long term. We can also immediately enable snapshots and the retention policies therein. On top of that, we can encrypt the folder if we choose, give it an encrypted password, and finally you can have it whether you want to lock it or unlock it on startup, which is really beneficial for many users, that if the system reboots and you don't want this drive to be immediately unlocked, perhaps after an install of an update, you can have it so that it has to be manually unlocked every single time. And the same goes for the benefits of using things like write once, read many. All of these are built into this system very easily and allow you to create the perfect storage area for your needs. It's that straightforward. But for now, as you can see, I have to go over to the other provisioning. If we come out of that one, we can talk about some of the other benefits that are built into the QNAP more specifically. So for example, when we're looking at those list of available drives there, another thing that we've got support of is predictive failure. Now, if we go to the global settings, what that translates as is if we can have this set up where we can have a predicted failure and action by the NAS. Now, this isn't to be confused with a hot spare. Now, when you create a normal RAID configuration, you would have one drive at least that acts as a safety net if the system has one drive fail. That means that if one of your drives dies, so for example, if we head back into the RAID storage pool there, we can have a little look at one of these RAID pools and go for that one. We'll go for the NAS and the enclosure actions there. We can list and have a little look at the RAID configurations we have inside. Now, in the normal hot spare, what would happen is when one of your drives dies or fails, the system will automatically switch over to a new drive in there and rebuild the RAID, which is quite good, but it does result in the system taking a little while to rebuild and resync that new drive. Where things change with predictive failure is the system will monitor using a range of on-drive tools which you can choose whether to use or not use depending on how you want to use adhere to them. And if triggers come from these drives, what will happen is, rather than going straight into a swap out with the new drive, what will happen is the system will clone the drive that's showing symptoms of failure but not full failure and clone it onto a blank drive in the system. Then it will just swap the drives over. The result is that rather than having a resource and time consuming resync and rebuild during a RAID failure, what will happen is the system will just swap the healthy drive over with the new drive because they've got the same data, and there will be no drop in resource use and rebuild lost performance time, something that's built into the QNAP QuTS 5.1 system. Then on top of that, you've got benefits such as virtual JBOD, which allows you to bolt on available storage on this NAS onto another system, thereby allowing that data to be accessible in the storage area of another NAS or bolted on as available storage on another NAS. And this works in both directions too. Very useful indeed. You've even got drive analysis, which takes the logic that we've just discussed that is built into that drive predicted failure and takes it up to 11 with lots of analytical data made available to you on the health and management of your drives over time, and it goes into quite an extensive amount of detail. Then you've got things like file transmission monitoring, where if you want to utilize things like QUFTP to create an FTP server to run at higher transfer protocols, you can set that up on this system and others to communicate that data as quickly as possible. Finally, you've got iSCSI and SAN support, where it's incredibly easy to create an iSCSI target and an iSCSI LUN as quick as anything. We can go ahead, create it. Again, we can use CHAPS and other data protected sources if we choose. And it's that straightforward to create a new iSCSI target, and then from there select ourselves a network connection, apply it, create it, and then immediately create our new LUN, creating ourselves a brand new SAN as quickly as possible, significantly faster than doing it in TrueNAS. Again, TrueNAS is a fantastic platform, and I won't hear many bad words said against it, but it has to be said, it does make things a lot more complex when setting these things up. And the ability to create LUNs, target LUNs for your iSCSI usage is so fast and so easy and so quick to manage. And for those of you taking advantage of fiber channel 25 gig, 100 gig connections, this is going to be hugely desirable. And there are other applications and services I've not spoken about even up to this point, such as queue filing, which allows you to create an intelligent system where the system will learn when files have reached a certain age to be archived for long-term utilization for later, creating that perfect hot, medium and cold storage system with automated file movement and data movement from within the system, with some of which are AI supported to take more nuance beyond just the age or type of a file. Finally, QSync. QSync allows you to synchronize team folders on your localized storage devices, such as your desktop Windows machine, Mac machine, iPhone and Android, and these team folders will be shared and accessible locally on your own system, which means down here, as you can see, you can create QSync folders which are synchronized natively on your file browsing system such as Windows Explorer or Mac Finder, and then access the NAS remotely and quickly, as easy as this. And therefore with these, such as this 8K test files here, these are enormous files. We can right click, and as you can see, although they take up 7.9 gigs on the NAS on my local PC, they're taking up no space at all. When I want to, right click, go to QSync, and we can choose to share that file. This is using our native OS file manager, copy over to another area of my NAS or another NAS, or pin that file on my device temporarily or permanently long term, thereby changing the protocol ultimately. So instead of seeing these cloud icons here, we can choose, if we wish, to go ahead, go into the photos area, select a photo and say, for example, I want this file to always be pinned on my system, and from there I'll be able to always be able to see that file. And if I'm worried about it taking up too much room locally, I can go ahead and free up that space, and then it removes it but keeps the thumbnail. That's how easy it is to manage your storage on this system and create these team folders that can be accessed by hundreds of users without having to deal with the NAS UI, only for the system admin. Next up, I want to discuss virtual environments, because a lot of users are going to be looking at getting a NAS for their home lab and experimenting with either containers or VMs. And I'll say right now that QuTS Hero has got some absolutely banging applications behind it. Now, if we start light and go straight into containers, they have got their own container station application. This has access to multiple registries, and if we go down, for example, to the registry options here, you can see that it arrives with access to the Docker Hub and the Linux Container LDX image server. From here, you can either access those or add brand new ones as they become available, or are more tailored to your own group and community needs. Now, if we search for different applications here, so for example, if we explore the world of containers and look up a brand new one, such as Plex, it will search that and we can find lots of new ones which we can then deploy as we see fit, download local images, or create our very own Docker container from scratch very, very easily indeed. Now, that container station application, not dissimilar to that of Docker and the other ones that are in the market standalone, does give a huge amount of configuration and control available to at your fingertips. But if you don't know what you're doing, don't worry, because a lot of the time, a lot of these container images come with pretty good defaults, although I do recommend that you change up some of those ports and auth keys there in the background. It's a great tool that has recently seen an upgrade in its GUI to make it even more user-friendly while still giving a lot more information. Although, let's be honest, containers are never truly going to be user-friendly outside of something like Unraid. But on top of that, QNAP NASes also arrive, at least the x86 based ones, also arrive with the option of Ubuntu Station. Ubuntu Station, or Linux Station, allows you to install at 2 clicks an Ubuntu VM. You can choose version 18, 20 or 22 at the time of recording, and you just immediately open up and install the application, and as you can see, you just click the download link and then it deploys the VM like so. With lots of these outputs and defaults allow you to immediately deploy an Ubuntu VM on your QNAP NAS with QuTS 5.1. On top of that, when you do deploy the Ubuntu VM, you can configure pretty much everything, whether you want to assign a brand new alternative local network adapter port, whether you want to assign an optical disk drive, be it virtual or physical. You can choose how many CPU cores, the amount of memory, the displayed resolution, and more, with a huge amount of configuration and control on this Ubuntu VM that you didn't have to find elsewhere. Just download directly into the system UI, and from there you've got full access. And also, if you do assign this Ubuntu VM to the same network as the NAS, you're going to be able to let the virtual machine and the physical machine communicate. But if you want to go for more traditional VMs, that is where you want to take advantage of Virtualization Station. Recently upgraded to a beta that was launched earlier this month. We're not going to look at Virtualization Station 4 because it is still a beta, but there have been improvements in terms of the GUI and exactly what it can do with regards to high availability and with regards to deploying remote and sharing those VMs very easily, thanks to the update in Virtualization Station, really closing the gap between it and other high-profile VMware and Hyper-V deploy and hypervisors out there. But VMs are managed very, very easily, and as you can see, I've already got one VM running here for an installation of Windows. How did I get hold of that? Well, because even if you don't have VMs ready to deploy and create in your own bespoke VM, which again can be customized in a number of different ways here, even if you don't have an existing ISO or image to hand, you can go ahead and download versions of virtual machine. Don't worry, again, I've put this on its own local network, but normally if you had full unfettered internet access, you could have this drop down and download a multitude of different VMs from Windows 7 all the way up to Windows 11. But not just that, you can go into the VM Marketplace, and from the VM Marketplace download a bunch of other virtual machines for network and router containment and network management and health containment very, very easily, all of which can be run, back up, restored, and shared very, very easily here on it. And if you've got a VM running, you're obviously not going to be able to change a lot of the VM rules here when it's running. But if we shut that VM down, and again, I don't recommend you force shut it down the way I've done so. When a VM is offline, what you can do is either choose to clone it, duplicate it, create a snapshot to roll back to. But on top of that, you can also configure quite a wide variety of settings on that VM on how it's running, including installing a graphics card physically within your machine, which allows you to bestow the benefits of that GPU directly onto that VM. And again, the level of configuration and control of these VMs in this hypervisor is presented in a user-friendly fashion and in a highly adaptable fashion in what you can configure, add, and remove very easily. Now, what if you're already running VMware and Hyper-Vs on another third-party VM VM cloud? Well, you can use the Hyperdata Protector and migrate and synchronize the QNAP NAS with those existing VMs very, very easily in order to target those cloud-based VMs to be backed up onto a bare metal QNAP, and in some cases deploy some of those images if they are compatible. There are tools built into the virtual machine manager that allow you to do quite a lot. So for example, if we reopen the virtualization station, what you can do is import existing VMs that you may already have, or if you choose to, convert some of those to a better working and existing supported virtual machine image type. And again, migration is possible, and high availability is being rolled into virtual machine, the QNAP virtualization station very, very soon in that beta we just discussed there. So finally, if you are someone that's running Office 365 or Google Workspace data in those cloud services, and again that can stretch across a multitude of different apps and services that are built into those, what you can do is, once you, just like you could with a Hyperdata Protector, synchronize those services with your QNAP NAS, and again create a bare metal access point to those cloud SaaS, software as a service platforms, in order to create a network system where you may have 10, 20, 30 users in your home or business environment, all connecting with those cloud services. But in the event of internet disconnection, you lose access to all of those services. What this does is buffer and cache and synchronize the data from these cloud services natively to the QNAP NAS. The result is that if you lose internet connection while accessing your Google Mail and Google services, your connected client devices, all of your staff members, won't know the difference because they're still accessing all of this data that's on the NAS, and they're accessing it natively, so they won't see the difference. And when the internet is re-established between the internet and your QNAP NAS, it will resynchronize and back up all of the data that's been created by your client users in the interim time with that cloud service. So again, the amount of virtual and cloud synchronized virtual data applications for virtual deployment and synchronization with on-prem hardware from the QNAP NAS via QuTS Hero is really extensive indeed, and presented, I'm not going to say fully user-friendly in a user-friendly fashion, but I will say significantly more user-friendly than some of the alternatives out there. Next up, it's worth talking about what you can do in QuTS with M.2 NVMEs, because there's actually quite a wide range of things you can do. As you can see, we've got a bunch of different hard drives inside this NAS, but what's really intriguing here is these M.2, because we've got two different M.2 options here. And as you can see, there's a couple of different options. First and foremost, we've got a traditional M2 in there. It is a Seagate IronWolf drive there. And if we have a little closer look, you're able to see that we've got the usual stuff that we could do with all of the health checks and everything that was running at the same time as all the other drives. But on top of that, if we go into the Manage Available Disks section here, you're able to see that not only can we utilize this M.2 for caching, which is what you might expect, but we can also create a storage pool. But it gets better than that, because if we go into the Create the SSD Cache option here, you'll see that it isn't just a case of just banging on SSD for caching. You can create a couple of different methodologies and IOs very easily. So first and foremost, you can create the read-write caching or just read caching, or you can create write-only caching, something you don't find a lot on turnkey NAS. On top of that, when you are selecting the drives, and we'll select that one there, you've got other options as well. So let's have a look. So, oh no, we're going to need two there, aren't we? We just want to go for read-only caching. Let's go for that one there. Select one drive. And you can say where exactly you want to attach it to. You don't even have to attach it to the extensive, all of the shared folders. You can be quite selective in what you want to attach it to. You can also choose the IO there as mentioned. So if you want, you can have it to go towards more of a database, smaller metadata type size file calibration, or you can calibrate it towards larger sequential data, such as multimedia, all of which can be set up very easily indeed with that SSD cache management tool. But heading back into the disks there, what we can also do is create that storage pool option as well. And if we want to create a storage pool option, as you can see, we'll let that finish doing its little boot up window there as it goes through its different options. We create the storage pool, and once again we have the same configuration and options that we saw earlier on, where you would treat a hard drive in a RAID array or a ZFS RAID array, but now extended to the M.2 NVMe, something that some NAS brands are not really engaging with. So we can go for that one there. We've got all of the traditional RAID options there if we want to choose to go for that. So again, triple parity all the way through to RAID 0 if we choose. On top of that, we've got the same allocation and snapshot space alert. We can also over provision as needed, and it's that straightforward. So storage pool creation and caching is supported here. But the other thing we've not really talked about there is the other icon you saw on that list, which was TPU. What is TPU? Well, TPU is one of Google's AI upgrade cards. Now, if we head into this card here, we'll go into the information settings, go into the hardware. We can talk a little bit there about what exactly that does. And the Google TPU there, the Coral Edge, allows us to upgrade and improve the AI processes within this NAS. So rather than installing a bulky graphics card to assist the AI, you can use a $20 or $30 Google M.2. And that allows you to not only improve a lot of the AI processes in QMAGI, but also in QVR facial recognition for the surveillance. And they are working on even more improvements to be utilized with AI upgrade cards in QNAP NAS to extol the virtues and benefits of AI across the rest of the QNAP supported system. And on top of all of that, You've got the QM2 card series. This allows you to add further M.2 slots and further combined M.2 and 10G upgrade slots to your NAS, something we've already done here on this system with an installed PCIe upgrade card, which has allowed us to add a 10GBE upgrade slot. It's allowed us to add 2 more M.2 slots to this system down here. Now, again, that's not really a software benefit, but what I will say is all the things we've discussed thus far can be applied to it with multiple RAID configurations, with caching benefits, the different kinds of ZFS-based caching benefits for read-write and combined read-write caching, and all of that within QuTS Hero. It's hugely beneficial and hugely expansive with all of those benefits we talked about before with drive prediction and RAID benefits all rolled into this one software platform. Of course, it would be completely remiss to not talk about the subject of security when we're talking about QNAP, because try as they might, QNAP are going to have to wait a while before they can remove the stink of ransomware from their brand after being attacked successfully several times by the ransomware group Deadbolt. And we'll talk about this more later on in the video, but for now, I just want to talk about some of the security changes that have been rolled into QuTS 5.1 in this latest big update. Now, straight away, when you are utilizing the device, the security protocols, there have been some changes. There's the usual login with a password and details of your account. On top of that, they've got a new log me out of everything button that allows you to just effectively at one click of a button log out of everything that may have that user account, including the login that you are utilizing. On top of that, if you go to the security panel, pretty much every other remote level service, aside from traditional local LAN access on the most basic level, is now disabled straight out of the gate, as is the admin group is disabled by default whenever you're utilizing the device. On top of that, heading back into those login and security settings, two-step verification is now heavily encouraged every time you boot up the device, and you're repeatedly reminded about this. Alongside, if you use the device in what is deemed to be an unsafe state, the system will arguably quite aggressively tell you that you are doing so. On top of that, you can use the QNAP Authenticator app that's been rolled out recently by them. And again, whether it is that you want to use your existing 2FA two-step verification program, or you want to use QNAP's own authenticator with an app for Android and iOS readily available, that may be of benefit to you. On top of that, alongside those stronger default protocols that we talked about, they have rolled in and partnered with several of the kind of very well-known remote access kind of authors in the market, such as Tailscale, integrating that with a partner application to allow that completely free VPN tunnel service alongside utilization of TeamViewer as well. There's a few others, and although you do still have access to QNAP's own level of access with QNAP Cloud, you don't have to rely on it if you've somewhat lost faith in it in recent ransomware attacks. Now, on top of that, you've got the Security Counselor. The Security Counselor ultimately rolls in all of the different security applications, be they for antivirus, malware, ransomware, and general network security, and rolls them into a single interface. So all times you can run a malware scan at any point or plan a schedule, use the antivirus program that's built in. I think you can use the McAfee one as well, but that is based on a subscription, as well as a regular security checkup that will scan your system and then produce a range of tailored alerts. It will check for everything. Applications that have got too much access, it will go for the weakness of your passwords, it will look for loopholes and gaps in your security network makeup, and if you're running applications that haven't seen regular updates, and again, when you look at all of your apps, you will be told if there are new updates available. If you haven't set the system to regularly update those updates as soon as an update becomes available, you can set it up that the system will alert you if a new update has become available via this security protocol. On top of that, you can change the policies either with blanket security protocols or custom to really tailor a lot of these alerts, and at the same time use things like the notification center from QNAP to give you real-time alerts. And if this then that level of notification when things happen on your system at all times. It is very customizable, and all the time you can configure these options to the best of your own preset setup. Email, SMS, they're all supported there with all of these alerts arriving to you, and some alerts being a lot more catered and tailored as you need. I'm not going to say that QNAP have completely removed the stench of ransomware that's on them, but they have made changes to their platform since those attacks. We will talk in a little bit more detail on those in just a moment. Let's be honest, there are going to be things about QNAP and QuTS that aren't going to be perfect for you. So although we've talked about a lot of great things about QuTS at this point, let's talk about the 5 reasons why you might want to give it a complete miss.
Come on, that's just the way it is.
So first up, of course, we're going to talk about it. It is going to be just how many times QNAP have been targeted successfully or even unsuccessfully sometimes for malware and ransomware. We talked about Deadbolt there, we talked about how it was hit more than once, and again, some of that repeated attack does come down to people not updating their firmware, but more on that in a moment. But then you've got other attacks such as the QLocker ransomware attack, then you've got other ones where there was vulnerabilities found in backdoors of certain different applications and services. Then you had, alongside QLocker, you also had QSnatch. And again, there just seemed to be an overwhelming number of attacks on the QNAP platform there, which unfortunately kind of gave way to a feeling for a lot of users that QNAP does not, or did not, or does not, it's up to you if you want to go for the present or past tense, take security seriously enough on their platform. Now, as I mentioned earlier on, there's always going to be a question mark around the responsibility, because some users do set these devices up in an unsafe fashion, or they don't go to their update section and make sure that those updates are regularly followed. Sometimes you want to make sure that, for example, critical updates and security updates are automatically installed. This is not something that's enabled by default on a QNAP system, and if you don't make a point of always installing those updates automatically, you may be running a system for days, weeks, months, or years using an old firmware update. And of course, any software, and again, you can head over to TrueNAS, you can head over to Synology, you can head over to any network or internet-based software, you're only going to remain one step ahead of the hackers. All you ever get with hacking is a firmware update comes out, and then the hackers attack it to find a vulnerability. Once that vulnerability is found, it is then patched in an update. It affects every software in the world. Now, of course, a lot of software like these can be built on Linux. When they are built on Linux, and again, I'm not specifically calling out QTS Hero for obvious reasons, but Linux themselves have vulnerabilities found all the time, which they patch, and then all the people that build on Linux have to apply afterwards. Again, it is mentioned on Bleeping Computer, it's mentioned on every site that we talked about. But it is the way these updates are handled, it is how security is adhered to. And even though, as mentioned throughout the course of this video, I've talked about the customization and support available on the QNAP platform to kind of build the system your own way, sometimes it has to be said that to make a system so incredibly flexible in its approach will result in a system that has too many variables for a less experienced user to set up accordingly, and it can make them put themselves in an unsafe position unknowingly. And I think QNAP, unfortunately, still hasn't found the right balance between all of these decisions and maintaining security appropriately on their platform. They're doing a lot better, as mentioned in point 5 of this video, but nevertheless, they're going to have to wait a long time before they can remove the stench of these sort of things from their platform.
Come on, that's just the way it is.
Next up, remember all those nice things I said about how M.2 NVMEs are utilised in QTS Hero? Well, there is one feature that is missing, but what gets really annoying is that if you go for the more affordable QNAP NAS systems that use QTS instead of QUTS, so using the ext4 one instead of using the ZFS based one from QNAP, there's one particular M.2 feature that is missing, and that is QTier. Now, if you try to go into the storage area, and remember earlier on I showed you that manage free disks option, and it gave us the option to create a storage pool or create an area of SSD cache. Well, if you use the ext4 NAS version of QNAP software and you go into the same storage manager, you have a new option, as you can see, called QTier. Now, QTier is particularly impressive because what it does is it's kind of like the middle ground between a storage pool and caching. What does that mean? Well, as you can see from this diagram here, a storage pool that has QTier combines hard drives and SSDs into one large pool. There's one large area of storage that combines all of the data. Then, as the system learns what is the data that's more frequently accessed, it doesn't copy small amounts of that data onto the SSD as you would find in caching. It physically moves the more frequently accessed data, otherwise known as hot data, specifically onto the SSD. It then moves warm data onto middle ground storage speeds, such as SATA SSDs or SAS-based hard drives. Then finally, the least accessed data is then moved in the background over to the larger, slower and more affordable hard drives. QTier is an absolute game changer, and it's a real shame they've not integrated it into QuTS with ZFS, because they've managed to crack how to do ZFS expansions in RAID storage pools, and you've got a lot of the inline benefits of ZFS within the fully featured GUI and apps and services of QTS in QuTS. But the lack of lack of QTier, particularly for those going for these more larger and aggressive QNAP NASs for photo and video editing, is a real shame that it's missing there, and something that, although it's on ext4 NAS systems and is beneficial, isn't as useful as it could have been for these larger RAID systems.
Come on, that's just the way it is.
This next point is one that I am sure a lot of you have recognised throughout the course of this video, and that is that the GUI in QuTS, it's not hugely consistent. What do I mean by a lack of consistency there? Well, I mean it in a few different ways. One, in terms of responsiveness. When you're opening up certain applications and services, it doesn't feel as instant as you might like. Sometimes delays can be explained when there's analysis there in the background, but others, the delays just seem to make no sense. And when you're accessing certain options and feature menus throughout using the system, some things just seem to take longer than they should to appear on screen. Sometimes when you're using resource monitors, the information you're getting for the health of the system doesn't feel quite as real time as you might like, and these small delays and inconsistencies do grow gradually as you're opening more apps and services. And obviously there is a question mark around how much RAM you're using, but when you're looking at this system I'm running here, which I would argue has a decent amount of memory at 16 gig, some of these delays just don't feel consistently justifiable. For example, if I open up the Security Counselor, some of the things just don't seem to load up quick enough for me. And this isn't a high-end processor we're looking at here. This isn't like I'm booting up a new VM. These are things that don't seem to open with the alacrity and speed that I would expect on here. Now, that could be a background efficiency thing. Again, when we look at the resource monitor, I am, running quite a lot of processes, but I'm only using 4 gig of a 16 gig enabled machine there. CPU utilization, yeah, sure, the average is relatively high, but it's not massive, and we're still running a quad core Intel i3 NAS here. We're not running, a particularly low end rig, and I'm just surprised sometimes at the lack of consistency and speed of processes when I'm utilizing it. On top of that, talking of inconsistency, apps and services, there's no unified kind of stance on the presentation. Sometimes I'll open an app or service and the text is increasingly small. Other times the text will be very, very large. And when it comes to the apps and services that I run, there doesn't seem to be an overarching design and theme and unification across the font size, scale, type and icon size throughout the utilization of the system. Sometimes when we look here, we look at this nice Swish GUI, and then we open up the menus, and the fonts have gone incredibly small. We'll open up the login and security settings there, and it's this nice swishly designed and quite clear menu system here. But it's not always the case, and sometimes the things you're utilizing aren't the same kind of uniform design choice. And overall, there just seems to be that the UI is lacking a kind of slick polish across the whole of its user experience that it could really stand to use. And particularly when we look at utilizing the HDMI output that I mentioned earlier on, if we look at the HDMI, we go back into the control panel, we go into the HDMI output there, and we have a look at the design choices there, applications like this one just feel like they could do with a little bit more work. The HD Station application, we mentioned it earlier on in the App Center there, it does have apps, and you can go to the third-party App Center to get more applications to install on there, but at the same time, then the range of apps and services officially available, this is all the apps that you can install via that HDMI on QNAP's own App Center. Not a lot, right? And although there are absolutely loads in the QNAP Club store for the HDMI output, there's not many on the actual official store there. And even then, how it looks when you open it up, another complete contrast in the design. So overall, between all of it, as much as I like the work that QNAP does on a lot of their apps and services, I do think they need to set aside some time to create a more unified and, single vision user experience, and work a little bit more on the back end and the efficiency of a lot of these apps and services that are opening, because these little tiny delays just make the thing feel slightly less stable than their biggest competitor, Synology.
Come on, that's just the way it is.
Next up, do you remember all those nice things I said about surveillance on this platform having 8 camera licenses and how we'd reviewed it in a bunch of different videos in the past? Well, it is worth highlighting that surveillance on QuTS Hero is not as cut and dry as that. And why is that? Well, if we head into the App Center, you'll see what I mean. We go into the surveillance center there, and yes, we've got QUSB cam. I hate seagulls. They've got QUSB cam here that allows you to turn a USB cam connected to your QNAP NAS as an additional IP camera, along with support of 4,000 and 5,000 more IP cameras out there. But as you can see here, we don't have QVR Pro, we've got QVR Elite. And I know what you're thinking, Elite's better than Pro, right? Well, QVR Elite is the much more efficient alternative to QVR Pro. And as good as that sounds, it does come with one, in my opinion, major downside. And that is you only have 2 camera licenses. If you use QVR Pro has 8 camera licenses. So if we open up there in another tab, QVR Pro gives you the option to add 8 cameras to your QNAP NAS surveillance setup straight out the gate. Whereas with QVR Elite, not only have you only got 2 camera licenses, but worse still, these camera licenses are subscription based. That's right. If you use, when you use QVR Elite camera licenses, if you try to add more, these are based on an annual or monthly or 3-year price tag for each of them. Now, $1.99 a month doesn't sound like much, but it's the idea that had you gone for QVR Pro, each of those camera licenses are lifetime, so you never have to worry about a subscription cost, even when you buy them, or the 8 that are included. But on top of that, with those licenses you're using on those cameras, they're not exportable to another NAS. Now, that might have changed over time. That's at least based on information I had about a year and a half ago when they rolled out QVR Elite and that licensing structure there. But still, nonetheless, it's nice to have access to all of the different surveillance options, USB cameras, utilizing the AI-powered surveillance services, all really, really good stuff. But why QNAP insisted on moving QVR Elite as a default on this platform, especially when I know for a fact that if you head over to the App Center, and they may close this loophole, but if you head to the App Center, put in the NAS that you're utilizing, and again, scroll down to the bottom and download QVR Pro for QTS, this app will still install on QUTS and give you the 8 licenses. So QVR Pro does run on QUTS Hero, but they just don't provide it here. And that dodgy, I just don't like having to use subscription-based camera licenses when I would like this service to give me these licenses exactly the way it does in QVR Pro, both in number and lifetime support if I buy a license.
Come on, that's just the way it is.
And sticking with the subject of licensing for a while, my word, there are just too many licenses on the QNAP system. Yes, the majority of the applications I've talked about today, you either get one free license or they are included license free. In some cases, there's a couple of licenses, maybe a pinch more. But there's no avoiding the sheer scale of times you will read the words by license because you get one or two licenses included. When it comes to any of the services we talked about today, do not be surprised if you see the words needs a license, buy a license, you need a license. And this just appears everywhere, all over the place on this system. And again, they do include them, but there's still no avoiding that to talk about all of these wonderful applications and services and then sticking so many of them behind a license wall so early seems incredibly annoying, even if you are, hyperscale user. Now, to put that into perspective, this is some of the licenses on this system. For BoxSafe, you need a license. If you want to utilize QSearch in a different way, you need a license. Some of them, when they're third-party providers, kind of make sense. But when it's the first party, such as those QVR Elite licenses, QSearch, Virtual Cloud, Hybrid Mount licenses. Then you've got the AI camera stuff, where you get one camera license for facial recognition. Who needs one face license? Then it goes even further into the different licenses included. Then you've got cloud licenses to roll into that. Then you've got more inclusive and non-inclusive surveillance licenses all brought in. There's just too many. And I get it. They have to, command subsidy on their software long term. And they've got to make sure that the software is continued to be innovated, security updates, feature updates, and more. I get it, but there's just too many. And even if you're on board with licenses, it's also incredibly messy and convoluted as well. So whether it is for the reason of simplicity or for the simple case that there shouldn't need to be this many included when you've already forked out thousands of pounds on your hardware, either way, there's just too many licenses for my liking. And there you go. That has been QuTS, the 5 things that I really like and the 5 things I'm not so keen on in today's review. What did you guys think? For me, QuTS 5.1 is better than it's ever been, but it's still not as good as it can be. I don't like all of those extra licenses. I think the design choices sometimes are a little bit inconsistent, and there's definitely blibs and blobs of it that I just think are wildly inconsistent when you are trying to use it. I love the integration, a lot of the ZFS stuff in ways that, true NAS simply doesn't provide. It doesn't provide the level of ease of access, the number of client applications, both on the NAS and outside the NAS, in terms of the hardware that you utilize every day. And I would argue it's a lot more user-friendly. Also, integrations of features such as ZFS pool expansions, a lot of the security upgrades that have happened in the likes of Deadbolt and QSATs, probably not enough for everyone. Still nonetheless, the sheer range of apps and services does make it a still very impressive platform. I just don't think it's as good as it can be right now. And I think they could stand to spend a lot more time not producing new hardware, not producing new innovative apps and trying to spread themselves too thin, but re-centralize and refocus on a lot of the core applications that it could be built around that business users care the most about. Ultimately, QuTS 5.1 is a good platform, but it still needs work, it still needs polish, and I do think the user experience is not as smooth as some would like. I like it, and if you are in a position to buy a QNAP NAS that gives you the choice of QTS or QuTS, I'd say pick QuTS, but when it comes to those that want the feature-rich experience that they come to expect from modern turnkey NAS solutions, it's still not consistent and as smooth as some would like. Ultimately, if you do need to access a turnkey NAS solution and want the power of ZFS, there's probably still the best middle ground out there right now. But just bear in mind, if it's not going to be as user-friendly as you still might think a turnkey NAS solution can be, and therefore do your research, look at the online demos and use videos like this to really understand what QuTS 5.1 offers before you invest thousands of pounds. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this review. Let me know in the comments below if you did. If you want to support us in what we do moving forward in the most passive way possible, use the links in the description to take you to products that we've talked about today. Only use those links if you were going to go to those shops anyway, and if they are available in your region and you found the video helpful. If those things are true, then please use those links, because anything you buy, and I mean anything you buy, as they are affiliated, will result in a small fee coming back here to NAS Compares. It is just me and Eddie here. We don't have writers, we don't have freelancers. It's me and Eddie doing everything. What is everything? Everything includes the videos that you see, the articles that we publish every day, the free advice section, the big blue button on the right hand side of every page on NAS Compares, the community forum, the Discord, and all of that Ko-Fi consultation and support for our users and the members scheme. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.